Good to be back. Are we good, Amar? Okay, well, it's good to be back. Obviously, we haven't done this for 2 weeks for a very obvious reason. My daughter was born, so I had a really good excuse. And it's a 6-pound, like 4-ounce adorable excuse for not teaching. So, with that being said, there's good news and bad news tonight. The bad news is that I did not have time to make a PowerPoint. The good news is that I printed up all of my notes for you guys that I can hand out after. So, good news, bad news. So, hopefully next week I'll be able to start getting back with PowerPoints, but this was the first week back with me teaching and doing everything with Hattie, and so time ran away from me. So I'm still figuring out that schedule of figuring out how to sleep and do things, you know.
Why didn't you ask Hattie to make them?
Well, I was going to, but she's very selfish and just wanted to put pictures of herself, which I'm sure you guys would have all been fine with. But that's not the information I'm giving out. See, I'll put pictures of her when I talk about Queen Esther, okay, because, you know, because it's Hadassah, and that's, you know, Queen Esther's Hebrew name.
Love that
So
name.
it's a good name.
I read a book by Francine Rivers that had that. It was a fictional character in Jerusalem, but that's how.
Is Voice of the Winds? No. Is it that one?
They're all like that. They're like, hear the wind, voice of the wind.
Yeah. Abby's read almost every single one, if not every single Francine Rivers. So
Me too.
yeah, she owns that one. She talked about it, and she actually just read. Who is it by? Like Timothy Tenney or something like that, who wrote the One Night with the King, which is like the historical fiction that they made into a movie about Queen Esther.
I love it.
Yeah, I like the movie. Yeah, it was One Night with the King. It's a pretty good rendition. I mean, it's obviously they have to take some leeway because you don't know everything, but it follows true to the story. I mean, better than the VeggieTales. So,
Really?
yeah. I was really surprised when I read, you know, the Book of Esther that there wasn't a singing competition about dogs and cats, you know, to see who would become queen. It was really.
That was disappointing.
Yeah. And Haman, you know, it was really gruesome. He and his family died. They didn't go to the island of perpetual tickling. So, you know, I mean, I thought that was a real thing, but you know, apparently not. So, all right, so we are continuing on. We're going to talk about the history of Judah today. So we already looked at the history of Israel. We ended with King Hoshea and the destruction of Samaria and the exile into Assyria. We did that 2 weeks ago. So now we're going to look to the south at the history of Judah. For those of you who just came in, I didn't get a chance to make a PowerPoint, but I do have the notes printed up. So at the end, I'm going to hand out the notes. So, all right. So after Rehoboam dies, Rehoboam, if you remember, he is the son of Solomon, and with Rehoboam came the split of Israel, where you have the northern kingdom of Israel, obviously in the north, and then you have Rehoboam ruling in the south. Okay, and a couple of weeks ago, I think it was about 3 weeks ago then, we ended with Rehoboam, and then 2 weeks ago we did the history of the north, so now we're doing the history of south. But after Rehoboam dies, it's his son Abijah, or Abijam, who reigns. All right, and he reigns for 3 years, from 913 to 911. And he unfortunately followed after his father. Oh, by the way, you can turn to 1 Kings. I should tell you that. 1 Kings, because we're following 1 Kings mainly. Every now and then we're going to talk about 1st and 2nd Chronicles, or 2nd Chronicles. But it's 1 Kings, oh goodness, where was it? I think it was 14 or 15, yeah, 1 Kings 15. That's where we're starting off. 1 Kings 15. So since you don't have notes to take down. If you look at 1 Kings 15, and then you just keep going as we follow along, you'll be able to follow through 1 and 2 Kings and follow the stories and the kings that I'm talking about, just so you guys know. And then every now and then I'll reference something in the Chronicles, because sometimes the Chronicles, the author in the Chronicles will add a couple of things that's not in the Kings. So Abijah, or Abijam, he was not a good king. He followed after his father Rehoboam. However, what the author does say is that because of David, God kept someone on his throne. So because of David and the covenant that God made with him, even when you have bad kings of Judah, they're still going to have someone on the throne. It's going to be continuous until you get to the exile. But God is faithful according to the covenant that he made with David. So you're going to see that, which is not the case, if you remember, with Israel, where you had multiple people, multiple lines of kings up in Israel. In Judah, you still have the Davidic line. Everyone is related to David on the king, or on the throne in Judah. So, yes?
Just typed up though in notes.
Yeah, you know what? How about I just hand them out now? That way you guys can follow. You just want to do that? Bev, you want to hand these out?
No,
You want to be teacher's pet, Bev?
Yeah. That's what happens when you don't sit in the back, Bev. Bev was trying to make fun of Chris for sitting in the back earlier. And so I hope I made enough. I only made 8 because I wasn't sure how many people were showing up. So I hope I made enough for everyone. See, David, this is why no one wanted to sit next to you.
You didn't want to let loose of it.
All right, so after Abijah, you have his son Asa, who reigned for 41 years. And he reigned from 911 to 870. And he began his reign still during Jeroboam's reign in Israel. And Asa was a good king. And that's different already from the line of Israel, because Israel did not have a good king. And Judah actually does have good kings. Asa was a righteous king. He put away the male prostitutes. He tore down the idols that his father had put up. And he also cut down the Asherah, which his mother had placed. And he removed her from being the queen mother. So he actually removes his mom from being queen mother. And he tears down the Asherah, which is a female deity, an image of a female deity that she had stuck up. And he tears that down. Asa also dedicates many items and brought them into the house of the Lord. And he also battled with Baasha, king of Israel, after Jeroboam is no longer king of Israel. So Asa battles with Baasha, king of Israel, and he worked a treaty with the king of Syria to help them. And Asa eventually dies in his old age, possibly due to a disease of his feet, and his son Jehoshaphat then reigns in his stead. Jehoshaphat reigns from 873 to 848 BC, which is around 25 years. And he was also a good king, like his father, although he did not take down the high places. Now, the high places are places of worship and sacrifice. They're usually on a hill or on a mountain, thus why they're referred to as high places. And so the people would still go to them and burn incense and sacrifice on them, which was against the law, because they were supposed to go to the temple to do these things, and yet they weren't. They were going to the high places, altars that were made just by anyone, and they would burn incense and they would sacrifice on them.
God.
Yeah, they would sometimes they would still do it to God, but many times they would do it to other deities. So not just Yahweh. Is there another extra one that we can give to Joanne? And I can print up another one if you, okay.
Ours would be no, thank you.
Okay, I'll print one up for Barb. I didn't get a chance to make a PowerPoint this time, so I printed up the notes.
He's a father now.
Yeah, which means I don't sleep anymore.
He's using that as an excuse.
You know, I can't hear any of you, so it doesn't matter what you say to me.
I said he's a
He's a father.
Yes, means I don't sleep.
Man, you're a busy man.
Yes.
There you go.
So the high places were not taken down by Jehoshaphat. And this becomes a theme, by the way. You're going to see this over and over and over again. Even the good kings, they're going to do really good, but they're not going to take down the high places. And so people can still go up there and burn incense, do sacrifices, whether to Yahweh or not. And they're not supposed to be doing that. They're supposed to be going to the temple, but they're not. Jehoshaphat did, however, expel the Sodomites from the land, not Sodom as in the city of Sodom, but actual way we think of as Sodomites according to the definition. And he would have lived during Elijah's ministry, actually. So Jehoshaphat and Elijah the prophet were contemporaries. And Jehoshaphat seemed to be in a treaty with Ahab, the king of Israel. And Ahab, if you remember, is one of the most evil kings that Israel ever had. And it definitely seems he had a treaty, especially during the last campaign against Syria. Jehoshaphat was in the battle against Syria when Ahab was struck down by an arrow. And the author of 1 Kings does not seem to think Jehoshaphat's peace with Ahab was a good thing. 1 Kings 22:44, which is the last chapter, I believe, of 1 Kings, actually, seems to imply this, and let me read it. 1 Kings 22:44. Here we go. It says, "Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat and his might which he showed and how he warred, are they not written?" Well, wait, that's 45. Hold on. 44. Sorry. "Jehoshaphat also made peace with the king of Israel." And this comes at the end of verse 43, where it says, "He walked in all the way of Asa his father. He did not turn aside from it, doing right in the sight of the Lord. However, the high places were not taken away. The people still sacrificed and burnt incense on the high places." And then it says, "Jehoshaphat also made peace with the king of Israel." So it seems to come at the end of the section of what Jehoshaphat did not do well. So the author seems to imply that him making peace with Ahab was not one of the good things that he did.
Did they exchange kids? Did they have a?
Yes, later on, one of the, I think it's either his son, I can't remember, is it Jehoram? Or one of them is, the daughter of Ahab, I think, is married to the son of Jehoshaphat.
Yeah.
I believe is what it was. Which I do mention later on, but I can't remember which one it is. Oh, it's Jehoram. It's the next one.
Trying to kill all the babies.
No, that's Athaliah, who's on the Judah side, I believe. Actually, it might. We'll get to that in a second. So anyway, one of the great stories of Jehoshaphat's reign is actually found in 2 Chronicles 20. So it's not found in 1 Kings, but it's found in 2 Chronicles 20. And there's this great army of Moabites and Ammonites that are coming against him to fight. And Jehoshaphat and all of Judah is very afraid. And so he prays to the Lord, and God answers his prayers. So when they arrive to go out to fight, the king puts like the singers and the worshipers actually in front of his army, and they're praising God. And a lot of you guys probably know this story probably from Sunday school, like a long time ago. I remember learning this story just growing up. And so he puts these singers and worshipers before the army, and so they're singing and praising God as they're walking out to meet the armies of the Moabites and the Ammonites. And when they arrive at the place where the Moabites and Ammonites are supposed to be located, they find that Moab and Ammon fought against the inhabitants of Seir, and they all destroyed each other. So all three armies are dead. They're gone. And so God protected Jehoshaphat and all of Judah, and it took 3 days to get all of the spoil, it says. And so that's a great story of God's sovereignty and faithfulness. And it's a great story of Jehoshaphat during his reign. However, like all people, Jehoshaphat dies, and his son then takes his place. And so Jehoram, who's his son, he reigns for 8 years, from 853 to 841, and he is the first king of Judah found in 2 Kings. And he would have lived and reigned during Elisha's ministry. However, he followed after the kings of Israel and was not a godly king. And the author of 2 Kings attributes some of this to the fact that Jehoram's wife was the daughter of Ahab, so that's where that comes in. And this fact might also explain the peace between Ahab and Jehoshaphat as well. Jehoram does evil in the sight of the Lord, but God kept his promise to David, and he didn't take away his descendants from the throne of Jerusalem. And during his reign, Edom and Libnah both revolted against him, and they continued to do so for quite a while, even after Jehoram's reign. And so he dies after 8 years, and his son Ahaziah then succeeded him. And Ahaziah only reigned 1 year, and it was during 841 BC, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he was assassinated then by Jehu, when Jehu was fulfilling the prophecy given to him by Elisha when he destroyed Ahab's household. And so Jahab destroys all of Ahab's household, and he also then assassinates Ahaziah, the king of Judah. And so this is when, Joanne, what you're saying, possibly, I didn't look into this, but his mother, Athaliah, ruled in his stead for 6 years.
That's what I'm thinking.
So I don't remember if it says, that.
They saved the little baby boy who went on to be a righteous king.
Yeah, Joash, I remember, if I remember correctly. But I don't remember if Athaliah was
Yes.
Does it say?
I never could say her name, but you're saying it.
I'm just saying Athaliah. It says the mother of Ahaziah.
Adaliah, that's the way
I say Athaliah. I'm sure you could pronounce it either way. It says that, yeah, it does say that she's the mother of Ahaziah, but I don't know if it says that she's the daughter of Ahab. She very well could have been, but they also sometimes married multiple people, so I don't know.
I thought I read that somewhere.
It could be in another place. It could be in another place. It could be in the Chronicles, where it might make the distinction.
Could be, I'm wrong.
I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't be too hard to comprehend. I mean, Ahab and his whole family was evil, so it wouldn't be too much to think that it could have been her as the daughter and what she did. So basically, though, what she does do is, so she rules for 6 years, but from 841 to 835, and she's the only woman to ever rule on the throne of David. And she does it through murder. Okay, so she kills all of the royal offspring so she could be queen. However, she misses one of the sons of Ahaziah, Joash. And he was saved by his aunt and hidden for 6 years in the house of the Lord. And the priests, then after the 6 years, declared Joash as the rightful king and protected him against his grandmother. And the people rejoiced at Joash being made king, although now I can't pronounce the name, Athaliah declared it was treason, and then Jehoiada, the priest, commanded the soldiers to take Athaliah and slay her, and they did. Okay, so Athaliah, the only woman to ever reign in Judah, does it through murder, kills a bunch of the royal family. One of them lives. The priest helped the young boy become king. And then the army actually kills the queen. So that's what happens. And so the next person that you have is Joash. He's the young boy, and he reigns from 835 to 796, about 40 years. And it makes sense that he has a long reign because he would have started very young, obviously. And he did many good things, including the repair of the temple, although, again, the high places were still left. And it also seems that he only did good when Jehoiada, the priest, was around to instruct him. That seems to that's what's implied in 2 Kings 12:12, or 12:2, I mean. When it says Jehoash, Jehoash is the other name for Joash. They always like to have two names for some reason. So Jehoash did right in the sight of the Lord all his days, in which Jehoiada, the priest, instructed him. So it seems somewhat implied that he did good only when Jehoiada was actually alive, because eventually he does It doesn't necessarily say he does turn bad, but you'll see in a moment what I mean. So he eventually took many of the sacred items and much of the gold and sent it to the king of Syria to stop the king from attacking Jerusalem. So Syria was attacking Jerusalem, and so he's paying tribute to the king to stop it. And so he's taking a lot of the gold and sacred items from the temple and giving it to the king of Syria, and so he gives away a lot of the treasury. And his death also seems to imply that he may not have ended well, since his servants actually conspired against him and murdered him. Although at least in the Second Kings portion, it doesn't say why. It could be because they may have thought maybe he was aligning with Syria, giving them tribute. I don't know. But it almost seems to imply that once Jehoiada kind of passed away, that he started kind of going bad. But I don't know on that part. But as stated, it should be known that he does do some good things, obviously, like the repairing of the temple, and that should be noted. So if he does turn bad, it is at the end of his life, but I don't know how many people actually really believe he did completely turn bad. They could have just been bad people that conspired against him. So after him, his son Amaziah reigns, and he does for 29 years, and this is from 796 to 767 BC, and he did right by the Lord, although, like his father, he again didn't take down the high places. And as I said, that really seems to be a trend among the kings of Judah. They do well sometimes, but it seems like they don't go far enough. They don't stop the people from sacrificing and burning incense on the high places. Amaziah also killed the murderers who slew his father, which is good, and he did not kill the murderers' sons, since that would actually go against the law, which is also a good thing. So he did right. He killed the actual murderers, but he didn't kill the rest of the family, which is following the law. He also destroyed many of the people of Edom in the Valley of Salt and took the town Selah and renamed it Joktheel. It says he did that. And his downfall actually was that of arrogance and idolatry. So after doing these great things in battle, he takes the idols of Edom and then he sacrifices to them. And it shows that in 2 Chronicles chapter 25, verses 14 through 16. And so he commits idolatry, and then he challenges Jehoash, a different Jehoash. This is the Jehoash of Israel, the king of Israel. And he challenges him for a battle, and Jehoash is actually against it. But Jehoash does have to defend himself because Amaziah is coming out to him anyway. And so he does, and he defeats Amaziah. He captures him and tears down the wall of Jerusalem. And Jehoash also took some of the treasury. And so King Amaziah of Judah, he lived for another 15 years after the death of Jehoash, and he is murdered by his own people. He eventually, I think it says he comes back to Jerusalem, and then he's murdered by his own people. And then they make his son Azariah or Uzziah king. And so Azariah or Uzziah, he reigns for 52 years, from 792 to 740. And he was only 16 years old when he took the throne. He did well like his father, only in that once again the high places were left. And he succeeds in war. Excuse me. So he succeeds in war, and God blesses him. Yet it was his pride that actually does him in. God struck him down with leprosy. And the story is actually found in 2 Chronicles chapter 26, 16 through 23. And the story goes like this. Azariah burned incense in the temple, thinking that he could do what God had ordained only the priests to do. Thus, he violated the law, and God disciplined him and struck him down with leprosy. So he was very zealous for the Lord. Unfortunately, he didn't follow the law. And so he tried to be like a priest. And the priests are only Levites from the tribe of Levi, and the kings are from the tribe of Judah. And so there's only two people in the Bible that have ever been a king and priest. One of them is Melchizedek, and the other one is Jesus. They're the only king and priests that have ever existed. Okay, but Azariah tried to do the same thing, and he's struck down with leprosy. Okay, because he violates the law. And so he lived, he actually did live during the ministry of the prophet Isaiah, and his son Jotham then ruled in his stead, even during the rest of Azariah's life, because he had to be separated from the people as a leper. And so he lived in a separate house, and his son then ruled for him. Jotham reigned from 750 to 732, which was 16 years. And he did right in the sight of the Lord like his father, although unlike his father, he didn't enter the temple and burn incense. He builds the upper gate of the house of the Lord, and he did fight and prevail over the Ammonites. And the only thing, again, that he didn't do was tear down the high places. It was during Jotham's reign that the Lord began to send the king of Syria against Judah. Okay, and then after his death, his son Ahaz reigned in his stead. And so Ahaz, he reigns from 735 to 716, and his reign, like Jotham, is 16 years. And he was king of Judah during Israel's defeat by Assyria. So Ahaz reigned when Israel was taken over and put into exile by the Assyrians. Ahaz was not like his father or his grandfather, and he did evil before the Lord. In fact, he even sacrificed his son on an altar. It says that it made him, pass through the fire. He burned incense. He sacrificed on the high places, as it says in 2 Kings 16:4, as well as under every green tree. So it seems that, the high places weren't really enough if you're supposed to take that literally under every green tree, which I don't think you're supposed to take it literally, but more in the sense of he did it pretty much anywhere. He was not against burning incense and doing sacrifices anytime he went, anything like that. He truly disobeyed God and committed many abominations, and he committed much idolatry, and he led the people away from the Lord. He made peace with Assyria when Syria attacked. So he made peace with Assyria when Syria attacked Jerusalem, and the Assyrians defeated the Syrians and took them into exile. And so, while Ahaz was in Damascus, he saw an altar he liked. And so he had his priest then make a replica of it and have it set up in his house and have the priest then sacrifice upon it. He also removed the sea of bronze from the temple as well as other things. So he did a lot of evil things. Just a lot. And then his son reigned after him. Sorry, I have a tickle in my throat and it won't go away. Now, his son, Hezekiah, he reigned for 29 years, from 716 to 687 BC. He was not like his father. Hezekiah was actually one of the best kings. He was the exact opposite of his father. He did right before the Lord. He actually did remove the high places, believe it or not, and he broke down the Asherah and the sacred pillars. He also broke the bronze serpent from the days of Moses because the people were burning incense to it. So if you remember the story when the snakes came and were biting the Israelites, and so Moses made the bronze serpent and put it up, and when the Israelites looked at it, they would be healed. Well, they started burning incense to it, and so Hezekiah had it melted down and broken. The author of 2 Kings in chapter 18, verse 5 and 6 says that there was not another king like Hezekiah that came after him in Judah. So it says, verse 5, he trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel, so that after him there was none like him him among all the kings of Judah, nor among those who were before him. For he clung to the Lord, he did not depart from following him, but kept his commandments which the Lord had commanded Moses. So the Lord was with Hezekiah, and he prospered. Hezekiah defeated the Philistines. He also rebelled against the king of Assyria and refused to serve him, although he does pay tribute to him at one point, which is rather confusing. But he ultimately does rebel against him. And when the Assyrians came to attack Jerusalem, Hezekiah prayed and relied on the Lord, and the prophet Isaiah encouraged the king, and God answers Hezekiah's prayer, and he answers through the prophet Isaiah. And so what happens is that Assyria takes a great blow during that night. An angel of the Lord comes and kills 185,000 of the Assyrian army. And so the Assyrians leave, and eventually the king of Assyria is actually murdered. So if you don't think that angels are really that powerful, this should tell you that they are, because one angel apparently can wipe out 185,000 humans in one night. So don't mess with angels, okay? This is what we learn, all right? Now, Hezekiah, at one point in his life, becomes deathly ill. And Isaiah tells the king to put his house in order because he's going to die. And so Hezekiah then prays for a recovery, and the Lord grants him this, and Hezekiah lives another 15 years. However, it was during those 15 years that he shows some Babylonians his treasury, which the author and the prophet Isaiah imply that he should not have done so. And Isaiah prophesies then that the Babylonians will come and take the treasures that Hezekiah had shown him, just not during his days. So it seems that Hezekiah, it doesn't necessarily say, but I think the idea is that he may have been a little bit arrogant or prideful for what he had. He shows the Babylonians what he has, and that's wrong. And now the Babylonians know what Israel has, and so they kind of want to come and take it eventually. That's kind of the idea that seems to be behind the story. And it's interesting that it happens during the 15 years that God grants him the extra 15 years. So it's a fascinating little thing. Now his son Manasseh reigns next. And he had the longest reign out of any king of Judah or Israel. He reigns for 55 years, from 697 to 643. And he did much evil from, yes? Manasseh? No, he's the son of Hezekiah. Different Manasseh. Manasseh, the Manasseh you're thinking of is the tribe of Israel, Manasseh, and he is the son of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. This Manasseh is the son of Hezekiah. He's a king of Judah. So he has the longest reign out of any king of Judah, Israel, 55 years, from 697 to 643, and he did a lot of evil during most of his reign. He set up altars to various gods. He burned and sacrificed to the many gods that he believed in. He set up altars in the house of the Lord, and he also made his son pass through the fire. He committed witchcraft, it actually says, and worked with mediums and spiritists. And he set up the carved image of the Asherah. He made the sons of Israel do so much evil and go so far away from the Lord, and that it was during this time that God prophesied against Judah that he would abandon them and allow them to be taken by their enemies. Manasseh, it says, shed so much innocent blood that you could fill all of Jerusalem from one end to the other with it. That's what it says about Manasseh. However, near the end of his life, Manasseh was captured by the Assyrians. And he was taken, it says, with hooks, by hooks to Babylon. And this is in 2 Chronicles 33. And in Babylon, Manasseh actually repents and humbles himself before the Lord, and God listens to him. He is released, and he is brought back to Jerusalem, and he tears down all of the false idols and gods that he set up, and he commanded the people of Judah to only worship Yahweh. The only thing, of course, that he didn't tear down were the high places, where the people went to still sacrifice on them, but this time they would only do it to Yahweh. So even though Manasseh was one of the worst kings of Judah, arguably the very worst that ever existed, he actually is also one of the best at the end because he truly repents and turns back on his sinful ways. And he tries to do right at the end. So it's a really great story of Manasseh, from really bad to really good. And it shows that true repentance, right? God is faithful. He will forgive you when you truly repent. And true repentance is also not just a change of mind, but it's a change of action, right? Manasseh actually went down and tore all of the idols down, right? He didn't just leave them up. So, so his story is one of the best, I think, in the Bible. It's really amazing. And I think it'll be really cool one day when we get to meet him up in heaven. So, his next, the next son is Ammon, or Ammon. I'm not really sure. It's probably more Ammon. But I like Ammon better, so we're going to call him that. He reigned next, and he reigned for 2 years, from 643 to 641. And he followed after Manasseh's evil ways, and he worshipped the same gods, and he served the same idols. His servants conspired against him and killed him, and the people of Judah then killed the servants who killed him and made Josiah, his son, king. Now Josiah was either 8 years old, Josiah was 8 years old when he became king of Judah, and he reigned from 641 to 609, so 31 years. He was the last good king of Judah. He brought reform to Judah, and he repaired the temple. It was during Josiah's reign that the book of the law was found in the temple and brought before the king, and Josiah, after having it read to him, realized the danger that Judah was in because of their sin, and so he repented, and he humbled himself before the Lord. Josiah made a covenant with God to walk in the ways of the law and to obey God's commandments. He did the right thing by the Lord, having the idols and the images of the gods destroyed. He did away with the idolatrous priests in the land, and he destroyed the pagan vessels that were used for false worship. He also broke down the houses of the male cult prostitutes, and he purposely defiled the high places of worship. He did away with gifts that were given to the idols and the false gods. I think that was a reference to horses, if I remember correctly, that were like given to him from that were also like given to the idols, and so he like gave them away because he didn't want them. He even broke down the altar at Bethel that Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, had made long ago. Remember, Jeroboam was the first king of Israel, and he made the altar at Bethel. Well, it's not until Josiah that it's actually torn down. He also reinstituted the celebration of the Passover, so that hadn't been celebrated for a very long time, and so he reinstitutes that. And he also removes the witches and mediums from Judah. Josiah truly desired to obey the book of the law and follow Yahweh. Like Hezekiah, the author of 2 Kings writes that there was no king like him. So it seems that Hezekiah and Josiah were the two best kings of Judah after David. That's what it seems to say. Unfortunately, God was still set on punishing Judah because of the sins they committed during Manasseh's reign. God promised to remove Judah and the temple. It just would not happen during Josiah's reign. It was during Josiah's reign that the prophet Jeremiah actually begins his ministry. And Jeremiah was a prophet right before the exile, and Jeremiah is the prophet that saw the temple being destroyed and then wrote an entire book about it called Lamentations. And also the destruction of Jerusalem. It's also about that too. Josiah ends up dying in a battle with the Pharaoh of Egypt named Necho. And so his son replaces him as king. His son is Jehoahaz, and he only reigns 3 months during the year 609 BC. He did evil things, and the Egyptian Pharaoh Necho imprisoned him and then imposed a fine on the land of Judah. Necho also replaced Jehoahaz with Eliakim, who he named Jehoiakim. as king of Judah. And so Jehoiakim was Jehoahaz's brother and son of Josiah, and he reigned 11 years from 609 to 598. And it was during his reign that the first expulsion took place. So the Babylonians came into power during this time, and they took some of the people of Judah to Babylon. And the prophet Daniel and his friends were probably part of this group, by the way. And Jehoiakim did evil during his reign. And according to 2 Chronicles 36:6, he was bound by the Babylonians and exiled. And so his son then, Jehoiakim, reigned in his place for 3 months during the years 598 to 597. So you had Josiah, and then you have a 3-month reign, and then you have an 11-year reign, and now you have another 3-month reign. And he was either 8 or 18 years when he reigned. There's a discrepancy between the author of the Kings and Chronicles whether he was 8 or 18. It's because of how they do numbers in Hebrew. Some of the numbers will look the same, or they either forgot something, and so he was either 8 or he was 18. However, what both writers do agree is that he did evil before the Lord, and he was also taken into exile into Babylon. By the way, I like to think he was probably 18. It just makes more sense to me if it says like he really does evil if he's only reigning for 3 months. Not that I can't see an 8-year-old do evil, but it seems that 18 makes more sense. Excuse me. So he was also taken into exile into Babylon, and it's during this time that Nebuchadnezzar came into Jerusalem and took much of the treasures of the temple and the king's house. He also cut into pieces the vessels of gold that Solomon had made for the temple worship. And it says that he took 10,000 captives back to Babylon. Only the poor remained in the land, and Nebuchadnezzar then made Jehoiakim's uncle the king. And so Zedekiah, the uncle, is the last king of Judah. And he reigns, again, for 11 years. So you have 11 years, or you have 3 months, 11 years, 3 months, 11 years. And he reigns from 597 to 586. He was the king during Jerusalem's destruction and the destruction of the temple. He also did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. Thus the king of Babylon came and besieged Jerusalem, and there was a great famine in Judah at this time, and there was no food. And so the Babylonians eventually break through the defenses, and even though Zedekiah flees, he was caught and brought to Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar passed sentence on him, and so his sons were killed before him, and then he was blinded. So basically, the last thing that he sees is the death of his children. And so he's then blinded, and then he's bound. And so Nebuchadnezzar burned all of Jerusalem, including the temple, in 586 BC. Many of the vessels and artifacts of the temple were taken to Babylon. Most of the people were taken into exile, although some fled to Egypt during, according to the book of Jeremiah and 2 Kings 25:26. 2 Kings 25:26, it says, "Then all the people, both small and great, and the captains of the forces arose and went to Egypt, for they were afraid of the Chaldeans." You get the story more fully at the end of Jeremiah, because he's one of them that goes because they basically kidnap him. When he actually says stay, they like, no, we're going to go to Egypt anyway, so they basically kidnap him and his scribe, and they take him to Egypt. Yes?
Since I'm still on the search for the Ark of the Covenant, this question, the first line of CG, and they took much of the treasures of the temple. What was in the temple at that time?
It would have been just the rest of any of the utensils that were used,
The Ark of the Covenant, that's already long gone.
Yes.
most likely.
It's not in the, there's actually, in the passage of scripture, there's an inventory of what they took in the ark, and those sacred objects aren't mentioned, just bowls,
Yeah.
utensils, and
Guess
stuff
I'm not
like
finding
that.
it.
Yeah. I think it's believed that the Ark of the Covenant was hidden, or maybe taken away somewhere. If you ever watch Indiana Jones, he finds it.
Yeah. It's-
But be careful, because if you open it, your face is going to melt.
It's in a,
Or if you watch a documentary on Ethiopia, maybe you can find it too.
yeah.
It's true. The Ethiopians do claim to have it, yeah.
Yeah, so that's likely just a replica it was supposedly given by Solomon to Sheba for their son that they had, who became a king on the throne of Ethiopia
Yeah.
all the way until Russia killed them off in the 70s.
So that is true, I thought they didn't know if Sheba and Solomon.
That's,
They claim it, and it's a tradition. The Bible doesn't support it, but
the Bible doesn't explain.
But it might be
But
true then, according to.
it could be true. I mean, you have a historical, you have something that's passed down by generations that it is plausible.
yeah, it's plausible, but
We don't know.
probably not. But it's definitely plausible. The one thing I would say is that Song of Solomon is not about the Queen of Sheba. That one we do know for a fact. Okay. So even if he does have a child with the Queen of Sheba, Song of Solomon is not about that.
Okay.
So, well, it's just not about that.
I never thought it was.
No, that it was a belief. It was a pretty strong belief
Believe
that.
that.
Yeah, but if you read Song of Solomon, it says that the woman is like dark skinned because she works outside. The Queen of Sheba is a queen. She's not going to be working outside in her vineyard.
Taking care of the sheep.
Right, she's not going to be doing that. So we know that it's not the Queen of Sheba.
Yeah.
So if the Ethiopians are correct, Song of Solomon is not about that story. So the unfortunate thing for Zedekiah, the last thing he sees is basically his children being killed, or his sons being killed, and then his eyes are put out. Nebuchadnezzar burns Jerusalem, burns temple, takes everything. Some of the people flee to Egypt, and so basically the only people that are left are some of the poor people in the land. 2 Kings 25:12 says this, but the captain of the guard left some of the poorest of the land to be vine dressers and plowmen. Gedaliah is made governor of the land, but he was assassinated by Ishmael, the son of Nethaniah, who was a member actually of the royal family, it says. And so Gedaliah had told the people to obey and follow Nebuchadnezzar. And so it's a theory that Ishmael killed Gedaliah because of this, and since Ishmael should have been the one to rule since he was actually part of the royal family. That's kind of the theory. The Bible doesn't technically support it. It doesn't not support it. But because it doesn't actually say why Ishmael killed him. But, I mean, it's a better theory than I've ever heard, so. The last section of 2 Kings is rather fascinating to me. So the author, at the end, from verses 27 to 30, he makes a note that Jehoiakim is released from prison in Babylon by the king Evil-Merodach. And this is a new king, obviously, and this king of Babylon dealt kindly with Jehoiakim, and he ate with the king and was given allowance. And this probably would have been seen as a glimmer of hope for the people of Judah, perhaps even a foreshadowing of their release from exile. Now, the ending of 2 Chronicles also gives the people hope. For it ends with the decree of Cyrus after the 70 years of exile that the Israelites can then return to Jerusalem into their homeland and that they may rebuild the temple. So it's a message of hope to the readers, and it pushes the story forward. So the ending of 2 Chronicles looks ahead then to the coming of the Messiah, and it ends with Cyrus's decree that the God of Israel is still with them. They may have been punished and exiled, but Yahweh had not forgotten them. They may have been, they're still considered as God's chosen nation, and they are God's people. Through them, the world will be blessed, and from them, someone will arise to smash the serpent's head from Genesis 3. It's just not any of the kings from Israel or Judah that we've seen. And one of the interesting things, and we'll talk about this when we do Jeremiah, and we'll also talk about it whenever I preach on the genealogy of Jesus, is that the Solomonic line is, I don't know if cursed is the right word, because I don't know if it actually uses it in the text, but in the book of Jeremiah, it says that there basically needs to be no other son after, like, Zedekiah, because no one's going to reign on the throne again for Judah on the line of David. And that's a really big deal because if you think about it genealogically, Joseph, the son of, or the father, the stepfather of Jesus, would potentially have been either the king or the heir to the throne, right? If you're following the line, but according to what God says through Jeremiah, no one again is going to reign on the throne of David from the Solomonic line, which is why it's important to have Mary's genealogy and Jesus actually coming through Mary. But I mention that now because it was given to Zedekiah, I believe it was given to Zedekiah, the last king, through Jeremiah, which is who we ended with. But we'll also, like I said, we'll talk about it when we talk about Jeremiah as well with the prophets. So, but it's a cool thing because you think that they have no hope then, but Second Chronicles, the end of Second Chronicles, which is the last book of the Old Testament in the Hebrew Bible, they end it with Second Chronicles, and it's a message that they can go back to Jerusalem and that they can rebuild the temple, and so it gives them hope, and it's looking to the Messiah. That's how their Bible ends, is looking to the Messiah. So.
Wait, they don't have any books after that?
No, so theirs is they have all the same books that we have in the Old Testament, but they rearrange them differently.
Oh, so Micah and all that's before.
Yeah, they do. So the Torah stands for, or not the Torah. The Tanakh stands for Torah, which would be the law, and then the Nevi'im, which would be the prophets, and then the Ketuvim, which are the writings. And so Chronicles is considered the writings, and they have it at the end of their book. So they have all of the books that we have, they just have them arranged a little bit differently.
So they have them by subject or topic. It's not that it's chronological, is that right? Or is it chronological too?
No, it's not chronological. I mean, ours isn't even technically chronological. Because Ezra and Nehemiah are after a lot of the prophets.
Job's in the middle.
Yeah, and Job's in the middle of, yeah, exactly. And Psalms is written by many people over many different years. So, but ours is done kind of, you have the law, it's more like historical chronology, all the way to Second Chronicles, and then you have the, like the wisdom and the poetry writings, and then you have the prophets at the end, with Malachi being the last one, which ends, and then you have 450 years until you get to Matthew. So, and just so you know, the Hebrew Bible, they do not consider the Apocrypha, like what's in the Catholic Bible, they don't consider those books as part of the inspired words of God either, which is why they were actually left out of the Protestant Bible.
Which books are you referring to?
The Apocrypha.
No, Maccabees.
Oh.
Which books?
Yeah, so that would be like the Maccabees, which is where you actually get the story of Hanukkah. So it really is important history for them because you get Hanukkah from the Maccabees. But you have like Tobit, you have Judith, you have the Ecclesiasticus, you have the Wisdom of Solomon, you have, oh goodness. What is it? Jeremiah, or Bel and the Dragon. There's a couple other ones. I can't remember them all. But they're called the Apocrypha. And they're supposed to be in the middle between Malachi and Matthew. But I think the Catholics have it in their Bible. They consider it inspired. And I think the Amish might actually too. I'm not entirely sure, but I think they might. And I only get that because I was reading an Amish fiction novel and it mentioned one of the apocryphal books that they were reading in their service.
Enoch.
Enoch is another one?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can't remember. There's like 20. I think there's almost as many as like in the New Testament, so I can't remember
I
them
thought
all.
there was just like 6.
No, because there's like 4 Maccabees. There's like 4 Maccabees, I believe. Yeah, there's second Esdras, which is supposed to be like second Ezra, because Esdras is like another word, or I don't know, is it the Greek form of Ezra? Is that what it is? I think it's supposed to be like second Ezra. And I think there's like another like 2 chapters of Esther. Isn't that right? I think they add like another 2 chapters of Esther or something like that.
What I remember is Apocrypha means that it's not canonical, it's not considered inspired, but
it's historical.
It's, what they call, what's the word I'm looking for though? It's called,
It's Deuterocanon.
it's called,
Well, it's considered a holy writing, but it's not,
well, it's beneficial.
right.
That's why I say historical. Like, they are important, but they're not considered the inspired word of God.
Right.
And even the Jewish people didn't consider it the inspired word of God. Like they didn't even add it to their books, which is why we don't add it to our Bible. But the Catholics thought it was inspired.
They're not inspired, but beneficial.
Yeah, but the Catholics, they add it to their Bible. So if you pick up like the Catholic edition of like the NRSV, which I actually have, you'll find it in there.
And Google said it's 54 books.
Oh, okay. See, I told you there was a lot of books.
Thank you, Google.
I didn't know there was 54 books. I've read it a couple of times. And if you actually do read them, like you can tell they're not inspired. There really is a difference between reading the Old Testament and the New Testament and then reading those books. So, I didn't know we were going to talk about the Apocrypha today.
Well, you brought it up.
Yeah, I did bring it up, and I don't even remember why.
We're just making sure you know what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. Thank you guys.
You're on your toes.
Yeah.
I just thought that it would be good for you to mention some of the books of the Apocrypha because
No, you're right. I didn't understand what your question was at the beginning. I was like, didn't I say it was the Apocrypha? So, yeah, I forget that. Yeah, I honestly didn't remember that there were 54. I thought there was only like 20 something, but no wonder why I don't remember them all.
I thought there were 6, so I'm way behind.
I knew there was more than that because there's at least 4 Maccabees. So, all right, any questions about the history of Judah? Okay, so this brings us up to 586. So what we're going to do next week is most likely I'm going to take a break for a second and not continue with the history, but probably talk about the subject of the Messiah and talk about that next week, probably like a shorter teaching on the Messiah. And that'll help you understand after that when we go to the prophets, because the prophets are mentioning the Messiah over and over and over again. So it'd be helpful to know a couple of things about the Messiah before then going into the prophets. And so when we do the prophets, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to cover some of them. Obviously, I can't cover all of them. And I'm going to try to do it historically. So I'm probably, what my plan is for the prophets is to do at least like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, which Isaiah is pre-exile, and in some cases, is pre-exile. And then you have Jeremiah, who is pre-exile and then at the exile, right? And then you have Ezekiel, who is also pre-exile and, maybe / exile. And then we're going to talk about the actual exile and some of the prophets there, as well as some of the history in that. So you would have Daniel, Joel, Haggai are most likely exiled. Joel and Haggai may also be post-exile. Some of the prophets are rather difficult to actually narrow down specifically. We definitely know Daniel was exiled because, it's obvious he was in Babylon. It says that multiple times. And then we'll talk about Esther because she is also there during the exile as well when she becomes the queen of Persia, which is actually interesting because she's the queen of Persia. So by the time she's queen, the Medes and Persians had actually taken over the Babylonians. So the Babylonians are not in charge anymore. And so now a lot of the Jewish people are at Susa, which is like north, if I remember the map correctly, it's like northeast of Babylon, and that's actually where she's reigning from. And so we'll talk about that. And then after that, then we'll come back and do the rebuilding of the temple. So we'll talk about, and Jerusalem, so we'll talk about like Ezra and Nehemiah, but we'll also talk about at least what I'm hoping is 2 post-exile prophets, which would be Zechariah and Malachi. So that's my plan. We'll see if that works and see if the baby is okay with that. But that's the plan. So, any questions about that?
So we already did the Northern Kingdom?
Yeah, we did that 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
I think you had the phone call. I think you had a phone call during it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Were you asleep?
No, I was here and then I had to leave.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember you had a phone call, I think, like 2 weeks ago during it.
That's right.
Because I think it rang, and I remember watching Dana like run out because she was like really confused. I think we were all confused that we're here. We're like, the phone's ringing. So, all right. Well, thank you guys. Does anyone want to close us out in prayer? Okay.
Lord, help us learn from the mistakes of others before us. It just strikes me to hear about these kings who won't deny you, but yet they continue to worship these other gods, and it led to their downfall. I think they lost the temple, help us to know you, help us to walk with you. Lord, would you bless this week? Thank you. Bless Ethan as he grows in being a new